Andrew, can you just explain the wing feather saga just for our listeners who are like, what are you talking about?
I've heard this. Before you do that, I want to one quick thing. I've heard that it's like the mixing, or you have on there the mixing of Princess Bride and the Lord of the Rings. I think that's a pretty fair.
I think it's pretty fair. Yeah. If I could come close to either of those, I would be so happy. But yeah, I think that the idea is that it's a big epic story, and I want the stakes are high, and the characters are meant to feel real and round and human. And at the same time, though, there's a little bit of a wink that shows up every now and then in the story, which is, I think, what I loved about The Princess Bride. Is like it was really Monty Python and kind of goofy, but man, it was also really epic when it wanted to be. And so, yeah, that we were trying to think of ways to help people see what the flavor of this book is like, and that's what we came up with.
Family, all in this together. Family, we're taking a chance. Family, like birds of a feather. Family,
welcome to the neighborhood. It is a beautiful day in the neighborhood. And I'll have to tell you.
And actually, we're going to be talking about beauty, so that is a perfect way to begin.
Yeah. I could have kind of fanned out on this interview. Not everybody who listening knows who we're talking about, but I'm a huge fan of Andrew Peterson. And he's who we're talking to today, having a conversation with today. He is a singer, songwriter. He is an author, written a number of books. The Wing Feather series, if you haven't read it and you have children, you need to get them. Yeah. And there's even an animated series that off of that, the Angel Studios. Yeah.
And if you've read like the Narnia books with your kids and you're like, oh gosh, like what else is out there? I want to do more like that. The Wing Feather series. Yeah. That's what you need to do.
Awesome. Awesome.
So,
the way I think of Wing Feather is like this, dad joke meets Narnia, whatever. It's awesome.
So Andrew Peterson, I have admired for, probably for the past 20 years or so. My brothers are really into Christian music and, kind of like more cutting edge. Like I find out about cool musicians and all of that from my brothers. And my brother Martin probably was the first person who started talking about Andrew Peterson a long, long time ago when he was just getting started. And there's something about him that is, he is an artist and a poet. And so what does that mean? That means that he sees the world in a different way. Yeah. And I think in a way that is more alive, but also emphasizes kind of like the ethereal nature, that this isn't all there is, and that we're meant for something greater. We're meant for something more. But he communicates that through music, through song, through story, through really his songs are like almost like religious poetry in some ways, like they're truly, really deep.
What I loved talking to him about was evangelizing. It's time to pray, guys. But what I loved talking to him about was kind of the evangelizing the imagination of your children, right? Oh gosh, and there's a ton. I mean, because he has spent a lot of time thinking deeply about a lot of stuff, right? Both about God, about nature, about families and community. It's like there's just a ton of depth to him, but just a joy and a kind of like just an ease about him, Yeah. And anyway.
So he's a little bit older than us. So I feel like we've kind of like grown up together, but from a distance. I've seen the development of his work and everything over the years as we've been raising our family.
There's some keen insights that he has that I really appreciate, the way that he talks about beauty and the way.
We pull out some things in the key takeaways at the end of this, and I was writing down things during the interview, and I'm telling you, there's so many phrases that are like so gold. Great. There's so many great quotes. So listen for the key takeaways at the end, but you'll hear in this interview, and I really think that parents are going to be inspired to be a better parent and just to really learn how to just kind of like learn how to love and delight in your children.
All right. So before we jump into the interview, though, just wanted to make sure 2 quick announcements here. One, if you missed the temperaments date night, the family
What
dynamics.
were you doing with yourself?
Hello.
First of all,
it was amazing. Holy cow. The authors of The Temperaments God Gave You did a date night with us. We did record it. So have no fear, my friend. If you missed out, don't worry. We got you covered. So you can still get that date night recording. And it's really worth it to just take time for you and your spouse. It's great for your marriage. It's great for the way that you want to talk about and work on your parenting with your kids. So check that out, messyfamilyproject.org. And the second, coming up right away.
We still have our upcoming webinar with me on preparing for womanhood for moms to do. This is a crucial time. I think one of the most... Okay, so the biggest changes that a person goes through is, number one, being born, okay? Being born is a big change.
Big deal.
Number two, I think, is giving birth, right?
Having
when
a
you
child,
become
yeah.
a mother, having a child is a huge change. But you know what is the third most dramatic change in our lives? Is the change from girlhood to womanhood. That can be a really turbulent time.
Yeah.
And more than any person in the world, not to put too much pressure on you, but this is the way it is. More than any person in the world, a girl needs her mom.
Yeah.
She needs her mom to guide her through that time. Moms are the best people to do that. And in this webinar, I'm going to tell you why you're so important, what you need to do, and how you need to prepare to be that guide for her, and talk about two crucial conversations that you have to have with her.
You don't want the world to teach her what it means to be a woman.
Yeah.
Mom.
The world doesn't know what a woman is, guys.
Mom, you need to step up. This is
Yeah.
a great opportunity for you, your friends, and others to join Alicia.
Yes.
Celebrity. But on September 5th, you're going to get a lot of answers, and you're kind of getting a plan for
Yeah.
how am I going to approach this, preparing my
So
daughter
it's a live webinar, and we'll also have the ability for people to ask questions and things too. So please
Sign up.
just sign up for it. And if you sign up and you can't make it because, hey, we're all moms, we get it, life happens, you will get the recording afterwards.
Yes.
But you get the recording if you sign up for the webinar. So just make sure that you sign up for that.
Okay, so those are both available for free on our website, messyfamilyproject.org. But let's just jump into the interview and conversation we had with Andrew Peterson. Andrew, we are so excited that you have joined us on the podcast today. So thanks for coming and joining us today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So we should do a little bit of a clarification here. So we are the Messy Family Project. I have upstairs a little cheer camp going on with my daughter is doing with some kids. I told them to go outside. So in the middle, we may hear some banging, but you know what? Messy Family Project. We're all just real and authentic here.
Yes, got it.
But we're talking to parents and kids. And so this is something I think that the parents are really going to be blessed by our conversation and by Andrew's work if they're not familiar with it already.
So we've been familiar with your work for about 20 years through your music primarily. And then I don't know when Wing Feather first came out, but we picked them up pretty early and read them with some of our younger kids who are now older kids. And they're both through your music as well as through your books. And that then became an animated series with Angel Studios, I believe. And you have really spoken to the heart of Christians throughout the world. But particularly I've felt in your work, spoke to parents, spoke to and reached through these books. It's just a great resource for parents. So I don't know if you and your wife have been married for 25 or something years. I don't know how long you've been married.
Yeah, how long have you been married?
29. We
29.
30th
Nice.
anniversary is in a few months. Yeah, it's a long time. It's great.
Oh, fabulous.
Congratulations.
Yes.
How many kids do you have?
So we have 3 kids who are all
Three kids.
Yep, 3 kids who are grown and married, and one of the oldest, our oldest son and his wife, just had their first baby. So we are now grandparents as of about a year ago. So we are living the dream right now.
All right.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That is the dream, right? It's like being a grandparent is the best. It's the best.
Really is.
If we could have started there, that would have been.
Well, can you tell us a little bit, first of all, just about how you got started in the whole creative industry? I know you started with music and then you went into writing, I believe. Why don't you tell us
sure.
a little bit about how you got started
Well,
and what you do?
It was, let me think about this. I mean, I wanted to do something in the arts from the time for as long as I can remember. And was way into books and movies and music and drawing, and was, voted most talented in my high school, which isn't saying much because it was only like 60 people. But I ended up joining a band right out of high school. And not long after that was when I really began to follow Jesus, became a Christian, and kind of offered my gifting to the Lord in whatever way he wanted to use it, which then led me to Bible college. So I spent 4 years in Bible college, and during college was when I started really earnestly writing songs, like really figuring it, like something unlocked. And part of it is that I now had something to write about, now that I was a Christian, and the gospel was such a revelation to me. It was this complete change of thinking that I was so excited about, and was so sure that if I had grown up in like a Southern American Christian culture and had somehow missed the heart of the gospel, then there must be a lot of other people out there who have missed it too. And what I asked God if I could do was to just sing about him. Like, if there's any way that I could write a song that might open up someone's heart the way that some of the songs by like Rich Mullins opened up my heart to the gospel, then that's what I wanted to do. And, and that was only the kind of, in some ways, the beginning of my understanding of how we use our gifting for the kingdom of God. And so it was, right after college was when I reread the Narnia books for the first time since I was a kid, and then reread them again to my children. But then kind of feeling the same longing to, Lord, if I could write a story that might get to somebody's heart the way that these stories got to me, like, please, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to try it, kind of thing. And so yeah, it's been this long journey of encountering Jesus through these works of art, and then wanting to understand how that works. Right. And like, even as a kid, I remember when I would hear a song, I would lie in bed and try to understand. I mean, I just remember these vivid, moments when I realized, oh, somebody wrote this song. Somebody made this. There's a band that put this together. Oh, they were in the studio. What is that like to be in the studio? So it's kind of like, at first you just like cars, but then eventually you want to pop the hood and understand how the engine works, right? And so that's how art was for me. I wanted to get inside of it, and so it was not long after I had started making music, and Jamie and I had moved to Nashville. We'd had a couple kids, and the boys were old enough for me to read, like I said, the Narnia books to them, and that was the kind of inciting incident that made me want to really get busy and learn how to be a writer.
One of the things I was thinking about when you were talking is about your own childhood, and how, because I know I also grew up in a very in a home where creativity and imagination was really encouraged. My parents were very musical. We all took piano lessons. My mom grew up in Greenwich Village. And so we were, like, her go-to was musicals that we listened to all the time, and I think about how they created that atmosphere. I'm just wondering if you could share just a real quick about either your own childhood, how did your parents, or maybe they didn't do anything, maybe it was just a gifting to enable you to really think that way or have that curious mind? Or is there something that you've done in your home with your own children to help nurture a child's healthy imagination? If you could give any thoughts of what your experience has been.
Well, my parents were, I remember creativity was kind of a given in our home. My mom is still an incredible quilter. And my dad had a wood shop, was always making stuff, and so, there was never, it felt very normal. And we also had lots of literature in our house. My dad is a pastor. And so there were tons of commentaries, but then also Dickens and Les Mis and the Narnia books and Tolkien and that kind of stuff. So, it wasn't like we didn't have this home where it was just like we were all these artistes, making stuff. But it was also I always felt encouraged to draw by my parents and encouraged to read and that kind of thing.
Right.
So, but it wasn't like a really highly artistic home that I grew up. I was the one who was the most nerdy artistic. And and my brother is also my brother's a playwright and has written novels. He's a genius and anyway, and my sisters are creative in their own way.
Awesome.
So I would just say that like one of the things that I like to make sure that I point out is this idea that creativity and creativity and arts aren't the same thing. Like not everybody is an artist, but everybody's creative. Every single person you meet, one of the ways we bear the image of God is that we make things. And so I'm not super special. It's just so happens to be that the thing that I like to do is artistic, and there are mathematicians who are no less creative than I am. Right. And so, that was our home when we were growing up. But then, we moved to Nashville, and Jamie and I found ourselves in this artistic community of songwriters and poets and novelists. And, Nashville is just this amazing, vibrant place to live if you're interested in the arts, And, it's Music City and people think of it as a country music town, and it is that. But also it's a magnet for a lot of different kinds of art, right? And so our kids grew up surrounded by it. And I think that the thing that we did without really meaning to with our own children was, they grew up watching their dad and their mom. Some of the time, Jamie used to tour with me and sing, but they grew up watching us take art seriously, and they saw that it also was integrated with what we believe to be true about who Jesus is and what the world is and what we're here for. Right. And so there was this, integration, which I didn't have growing up. I grew up in the 80s. People didn't talk about art and faith. You didn't go to conferences on art and faith. Best time ever. It really was an amazing time to grow up. It really was. Great music. But anyway, they didn't talk about, art and faith. You couldn't go to a conference on Christian artistry or whatever. As far as I know, you didn't hear about that. But my kids grew up with that. Right. That was like the water they swam in. And so I think, all three of them are involved in the arts now. Like my oldest son and his wife are both book illustrators and work in the animation field. And my middle son is a record producer, incredibly talented. His wife is a songwriter. My daughter's a singer-songwriter. Her husband is a songwriter. We were at Thanksgiving or Christmas
family
dinner.
Business.
I know. Yeah, it's so funny. We were at Christmas dinner this year, and I realized that everyone at the table is self-employed, which is hilarious because it comes comes with all kinds of stress. There's no benefits, right? You got to figure out your own insurance, and you got to pay self-employment tax, which is crazy. So we were all sitting there laughing about what a funny life that we have, that our whole family is in this boat. But I'm very thankful for the fact that our kids, we faithfully went to church every Sunday. Our kids grew up knowing that this is part of the rhythm, that this is important to us, that we go to church, we receive communion, we sing the hymns, we hear scripture read. And also our kids grew up seeing other people in our community doing the same. So it had to have been, I'd love to talk to them about this, but it had to have been significant for them to have artists that we listen to in our home, music that filled our home, and then to go to church and see those same artists in the pews, right? Like it's just
worship
really,
the witness to that.
Yeah, it's just like that. You can be a singer, a rock and roll band in a rock and roll band, or you can be a fantasy novelist, or you can be a this, and that integrates so beautifully with what life as a Christian looks like. Your service to others, and you're walking in the way of Jesus. So I think that our kids grew up with this really sweet community of artists who are Christians.
So so we have a daughter who our third, so we have 10 children, and our third daughter majored in art at a Catholic college. And inevitably, when I would tell people, oh, she's going to be studying art, you know, people are kind of like down on that. But my perspective was always, look, if we have the truth, right, as Christians of who God is, and we want to communicate that to this generation, to these people, it has to be beautiful. It's simply there. We have to have a means of communicating what is right and true and good. And if we're going to do that, we need to do that because beauty evangelizes, you know? And I just think that now, obviously, we need people who are intellectuals and who study the truth and, you know, and all that, because we have to know it, right? We have to know, we have to understand it. It has to be out there. It has to be written. It has to be spoken. But it also, if we want to connect to the heart of the average person today, art is so very important. And obviously you guys, you're living that, you know, through all of your work.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't have to look far to see how, go ahead.
Well, it's just the power of evangelizing through beauty, right? You know, just that there's a certain part of the human spirit that is captivated and drawn to beauty. You know, right. Kind of the threefold that they often talk about: God, truth, beauty, and goodness, right? And we need God in the truth. We need to see him in goodness, but there's something just so attractive about beauty. We need that more in our culture,
right, that
has just kind of dumbed everything down. There's a beauty in community. There's a beauty in art, in the way that we express ourselves creatively.
Yeah.
And particularly just thinking of how do we maybe take that in a sense into the home? How do we evangelize our kids through beauty, and how do we evangelize their imagination through that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I would say is that, I have too many thoughts. They're all kind of smashing into each other in my head. One of those thoughts is, there's a book by James K. Smith called Desiring the Kingdom. And he's an academic. It's a really rich, hard to read book because I'm not an academic, but I do like hanging out with smart people. And so he has a user-friendly version of the book called You Are What You Love. But the thesis in his book is that humans are fundamentally desiring creatures. Like, we've been made for beauty. And like you're saying, our hearts are like these compasses that always get knocked out of whack, right? And so our desires point us and put us on a path for our lives. And so if our compass gets knocked out of whack by, we're always looking for the love in the wrong places. So the idea that church, that scripture, that poetry, that for me, and I think he makes this case that the liturgy, that the Eucharist is like the point at which our hearts are most, the compass is just aiming, it's recalibrated perfectly because you remember
right.
who Jesus is and the beauty of what he's done, and the beauty of the gospel all comes to this sharp focus there. And so I think in that sense, like, if we go through the world recognizing that we were made to love, we were made to desire things. And so learning to desire things rightly, the right things in the right way, in the right order, is part of the journey of becoming more fully human, which is to say more Christ-like,
right.
The older that we get. And so anyway, that's one of the thoughts that I have is like, yes, I'm agreeing with you that our hearts were made to wake up when we encounter beauty in that way. The other side of that is that
desiring things in the right order. I just want to write that down. Yeah.
Yes. Like Jamie, my wife, is an amazing hostess, and so her hospitality is one of her great gifts. Like, she can't sit still until everyone has what they need, and our home is this beautiful place where there's almost always a really fragrant candle burning in a corner, and she's always shaping the world around her to be beautiful and welcoming to people. And so you're talking about families and kids, like I think that's what she's done. So we're trying to paint the best picture we can of the new creation, of like a new Eden, right? And
Yes.
plant that seed in our children's hearts, so that later on, when their compass gets knocked out of whack and they look for love in all their own places, and they find themselves a long way from home, or they're hurting, or they're suffering in some way, that there is this keystone image that's been placed in their hearts that they remember without even knowing it. You know what I mean? And so beauty is one of the ways that we do
That's
that.
right.
There's hymns that we sing, and we plant these things deep in our kids' hearts. Not because it's like, this like magic spell that's going to keep them from ever suffering or sinning, like they're going to. Yeah. Our kids are going to goof up, just like we are going to goof up. And but the idea is that you're constantly participating with the Holy Spirit in the building of God's kingdom, right? And the welcoming in of the new creation into this present world in some way, in the best way that we can. And I think that when you do that, every now and then you catch this glimpse of what's to come. You get these little glimpses of the great ending to the story. And you can't, how do I put this? Like, we don't have any control over when that's going to work and when that's not going to work. Right? Like, as an artist, you write your song and you pray, Lord, please let this song be the light in someone's darkness. Please let this be the doorway through which someone finds you. But also, you can't control that. So you write your song and then you send it out into the world you're just kind of launching it, hoping that it makes its way. And then you just kind of got to hope that it works, right? And the image that pops into my head, there's a friend of mine who used to smuggle Bibles into Russia back in the days of the Iron Curtain. And he said that one time he and his wife had a bunch of Bibles in the trunk of their car, and they were driving on this like frozen road in the middle of Russia, and they knew that they were like the KGB was onto them or something, and that they had to get rid of the Bibles that were in their car or they were going to get arrested. So they stopped on a bridge, and there was this frozen river below the bridge, and they took the boxes and they threw the boxes onto the frozen river and prayed as they did it that those Bibles would float to the people that needed them. And as soon as they told me that story, I thought, that's songwriting. And in some sense, that's parenting. That's right. It's kind of like you just go, I don't know if this is going to work. I can't make this work. All I can do is keep telling the story and pray that these seeds that I'm planting find purchase in good soil down the road. And that's his business, not ours.
We talk a lot in our ministry about family culture.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
And just that in your home, you can't make the seed grow. Like, the seed is your children. But what our responsibility is as parents is that we need to create that environment. We need to create an enriching environment. And then just like the growing is for God, right? And like God has to help that.
And that
seed
pesky
to grow.
thing called free will.
Exactly. Because kids can always, shoot off in other directions that you don't expect. But it is our responsibility to create that environment. And then you create that family culture, and you hope that culture that teaches your children, like you were saying before, that desiring the things in the right order and having that beauty, that seed in them to help that reset that compass when they come across the false fake culture of the world, that they can be like, you know what? I've experienced real love. I've experienced real beauty, and this isn't it. You know what I mean? Like, when they have experience of something that's real, when they encounter the counterfeit, they're going to be like, that's like, like it doesn't comport with my heart. And that's, like you said, hey, there's no guarantees. But when we shape our children in that way, in that environment in our home, we can give them that experience of real truth and beauty,
Yeah. So, Andrew, as you just kind of going into family culture, because I do feel like there's a lot of families out there that feel like they're alone. that feels like that the culture is surrounding them, right? You have carved out the Warren. You have carved out a place for your family, right? And as you're looking back on the things that you think had an impact on your kids, your now adult children, what would you say, in addition to surrounding them with music, going to church on Sunday, worshiping together, what are other elements or things that you would pass on, advice you would give, if you will, to parents to say, how do we make our home a place where the human person, the children we have been gifted to be stewards, can really thrive and grow and flourish?
Yeah. I have to say, like, I feel so unqualified to really answer these questions. I'm so aware of my failings, in this way,
Right.
like
Sure, we all are.
we've done our best. Our kids are amazing. And I think I can answer the question with this quick anecdote, which is, the trick is, like, your kids need to know that they're not just loved, that they're liked, that you actually delight in them, that you are well pleased with them, with who they are. And one of our mentors, when Jamie and I first got married, talked about how, like, if you ask a lot of teenagers, do your parents love you? They would say, well, yeah. And if you said, do they like you? They would be like, I don't think so. They don't like my music. They don't like my friends. They don't like my whatever. And so, and I remember that stuck in my head, and I'm like, I think that we use these words like and love, but real love, like godly love, includes like, right? You get kind of
that's awesome.
delight in the personality of the deep waters that are in the hearts of these people, these humans growing up in our lives. So, C.S. Lewis writes about this great C.S. Lewis quote where he says that, every person you meet is a being who, if you could see them in their final form, would be this, like, shining, glorious creature, right? That you'd be strongly tempted to worship. And so to remind yourself, every stranger you meet, kind of like the Thomas Merton's epiphany when he was walking through Louisville and he sees everyone seemed to have, like, they were like, oh, I wish I could remember the quote. They were all shining like suns, was what he said. But he got this glimpse of the way God sees people, right? And to remind yourself that these kids that, are as imperfect as we are also glorious, beautiful, image-bearing beings. But I was
absolutely
when my oldest son, and I've told this story a few times, but when my oldest son went to college, we were praying for him the night before he left, and he was just going to college 30 minutes down the road, like in Nashville. But I was so sad that he was our first. He was moving out, and I was just so self-centered. It was like it's embarrassing now, but I was so sad because I felt like I had just missed it, right? And it was less about Aiden and the big adventure that he's going on, and more about me and all the mistakes I'd made, and me wishing that, every night I watched a movie on Netflix, I could have been hanging out with this, this glorious being that shines like the sun upstairs, and instead we were living our lives, and I missed it, and I'm so sorry. I did too many concerts. I missed your this, and I missed the play that you were in, and whatever. I was just beating myself up, and he's amazing. Like, and it's fine, and I'm a good dad. But I was just dealing with this frustration. And the next day at college, I remember my son telling me, it was just like, "Oh, Dad, you're a good dad. Stop beating yourself up." I'm like, "No." Oh. And Jamie would say, "Andrew, no, you're a good dad. Stop." And then we were at the school moving him in, and we would meet other parents, and they would say, "How are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I just have so many regrets. I'm so sad, blah, blah, blah." And they were like, "No, we know you. You're a good dad." And none of it helped until I talked to Brown Bannister, who's this older professor, a little older than I am. And he teaches at the school, and I saw him, and he said, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And I was like, "Oh, I was just so full of regrets, and all I can think of is the mistakes that I made." And he laughed, and he's like, "Oh, I remember thinking that same thing." He was like, "Can I just say, it has been so fun over the years to see the way God has made good of my mistakes. And that was the gospel.
Yes.
Because what I needed to hear wasn't, Andrew, you're a good dad. What I needed to hear was, why are you surprised that you messed up? Why are you surprised that you aren't a perfect dad?
That's right.
The good and the glorious thing is that we get to see the way the Lord makes good of these broken people that he invites into his family. And so it takes the pressure off. So you realize that like we get to watch redemption happen in real time with our children and with our own mistakes and all this. So it's just like, just make sure your kids know that you like them. Be willing to apologize and genuinely apologize and live in community with each other as these people who need the gospel. And I think that's the best you can do, because I'm just not going to get it right.
Yes,
absolutely.
I think that's it. That's the key right there, is knowing that, because I didn't know what I'm doing, and I'm not sure I still know what I'm doing. But you know, I came from an alcoholic father, divorced parents. I didn't have that experience, so I always kind of looked out for answers. But I always had this sense, or for many years, had a deep sense of inadequacy, that I wasn't, good enough, right? It wasn't worthy enough, wasn't able to, wasn't capable of, right? But it was in my simply just showing up, in my little gift of the kind of the brokenness that I had, that I actually became loved and delighted in as a son. Like you talked about the delight that we have as father or mother on our kids, but it was in that I actually received the delight of the Father. Like it was beautiful for me in my early estrangement from God the Father, that in my own fatherhood, I reclaimed my sonship, if that makes sense, right? And it was just this, I love how God did it, because it changed me, right? It made me who I am by being stretched out, by being called out to love my kids when I thought I was doing it all wrong, and but God writes straight with crooked lines.
Beautiful. And we get to boast in our weakness, like Paul said. And so it makes this, I'm still struggling with this stuff. Like when I mess up, I try so hard to get it right that when I mess up, I can fight all kinds of shame and, there's self-loathing, there's beating myself up, all this kind of stuff. But if I can just come to terms with the fact that, if I get it right, it's going to be by God's strength that I get it right. That is, it's a slow shaping of my heart, the conforming of my heart into Christ's likeness. And so I need to be patient with myself. Just like I'm patient with try to be patient with my kids.
That's a great song, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I didn't realize I was quoting myself, but I did, I guess.
Yeah. That was a good little plug. I love how you put product placement in there. That was great. Be patient with yourself. I'm going to endorse that song.
That's right.
Good stuff.
I want to transition a little bit to your books, because we have used them with our kids, the Wing Feather series, the saga.
Mike is looking for some insights.
And I'm like, how? I'm going to say this, just from the books itself. Did you draw from your kids? You've got three kids.
Maybe for those people who aren't familiar with the books, Andrew, can you just explain the Wing Feather saga just for our listeners who are like, what are you talking about?
I've heard this. Before you do that, I want to one quick thing. I've heard that it's like the mixing, or you have on there the mixing of Princess Bride and the Lord of the Rings. I think that's a pretty fair.
I think it's pretty fair. Yeah. If I could come close to either of those, I would be so happy. But yeah, I think that the idea is that it's a big epic story, and I want the stakes are high, and the characters are meant to feel real and round and human. And at the same time, though, there's a little bit of a wink that shows up every now and then in the story, which is, I think, what I loved about The Princess Bride. Is like it was really Monty Python and kind of goofy, but man, it was also really epic when it wanted to be. And so, that we were trying to think of ways to help people see what the flavor of this book is like, and that's what we came up with. But yeah, it's a 4-book fantasy series, adventure story about 3 kids who are basically find out that they're at the center of this great mystery, and that they've got to survive, and in doing so conquer the bad guy. So it's hard to talk about, because I remember Flannery O'Connor saying that, like, you know, if I could tell you what the book was about, I wouldn't have had to write the book, you know? So it's hard to like, as the author, it's hard to like say, well, here's the elevator pitch, but yeah, it's you know, it's in the same camp as Harry Potter and Narnia and Lord of the Rings and The Princess Bride. How's that? Okay. So it's
yes,
yeah.
I think you did it. That's a good elevator pitch. That sounded good.
Okay, great.
So I have to ask, so obviously you have 3 children, there's 3 characters. Were the characters in the story at all based on your own children? Did you have that in your mind?
Very loosely. Yeah. They were
okay.
Yeah, loosely. And I had to tell the kids, like, you guys were the launching off point, but like, don't identify too closely with these kids in the story, because the characters in the book really do take on a life of their own. They become their own, no matter, even if you start with, you know, yeah, they for sure departed from any real personality traits that our kids had. I will say, however, there was some weirdly kind of prophetic things that happened with, like, Sky, my daughter, who Lily was loosely based on her, but Sky was only like 3 when I started these stories. The fact that the Song Maiden in the Ringfeather books would grow up to be this incredible songwriter who fights the darkness with her music is kind of crazy. And then Aiden, the oldest, is kind of, he's the one who just read constantly, so there's a lot of Janner in him, as it turns out. And then Asher is this wonderful, hilarious, always hungry, just delightful human being. And so, yeah, there were these weird things that I was like, wow, it's weird that the kids grew into certain things. And I used to joke that if in my next book, all the kids are going to be doctors and lawyers and lottery winners.
All right, there you go.
That's for the grandkids version, right?
Yes, good idea. There it is.
Yeah. Well, so because what I loved, I mean, one, our kids ate up all the humor, all the weird names that you came up with for stuff, for animals, the toothy cows and all of that. But there was this epic sense to it, as well as some deep, the line of truth about identity and them being lured and being not completely changed, but changed through sin, right? You know, but that they could reclaim their identity, but their identity now became a superpower for them. I mean, there was just some great elements that were really masterfully done. And I felt like there were enough dad jokes to keep me happy for a long time. So, I really...
My pleasure. Yeah, I come by it honest. Thank you. I didn't... When I look back at the years that I was working on those books, you know, because I would write a book and then the next year I would put out a record, and the next year it would be another book, and then there would be another record, touring constantly all between it. So it was a busy season, but I was working a lot of stuff out.
Wow.
You know, with music, I can look at the record and it's like this very autobiographical artifact that sits out there and kind of reminds me, this is a snapshot of what God was doing in my heart during this season. And that's where these songs came from. And I can forget sometimes that the books do that too, in a pretty subtle way. But that idea of identity was something that I was dealing with. I was coming to understand the beauty of our belovedness. You know, the fact that when we belong to Jesus, we're given this new name. Revelation talks about, like, there's a white stone, you know, and on it there's this name written that only God knows, and this idea that our name is written on His hands, like all this kind of stuff, and so much of my personal struggle, like whatever sin you may talk about, is in some ways can be boiled down to this: I'm forgetting who I am, you know, and the voice of the enemy is often trying to convince me that I'm something other than God's beloved, and it's the moments that I forget that, or I believe that I'm not His beloved, that are the moments that it becomes very easy to walk away, to convince yourself that maybe this thing that I'm desiring wrongly is going to be good for me, you know. And so I wasn't sitting down going, how can I tell a story that will well, teach children about identity in Christ. That isn't what I was doing at all. But I can see that was what was stirring in me when the idea for the fangs came, the idea of these names. And so, like, I really want the story to be taken on its own terms first. And then you can kind of go, oh, yeah, there are these things that we can learn. Kind of like Lord of the Rings. Like, when I read Lord of the Rings, I'm just blown away by how much application there is to what's going on in our world right now.
Exactly. The layers.
Looking for believing that the power of the One Ring can save you, like that kind of stuff. There's all these great, but Tolkien was adamant that look, this is not a metaphor. This is not an allegory. This is an imaginary history of this world first. And then you get to apply it to our world. And so it's very applicable, but it's not allegorical. And so I think I want the same thing for my books. Like, I want people to read it as a story and then let the story do what it will.
When you say, like, you didn't write the story, like, to teach kids this, that, and the other thing, that it begs the question in my mind. So then what did bubble up to make you want to write this story? What was the
I just wanted to
what was it inside
I wanted
of
my
you?
kids to think I was cool.
That's what we all want, right?
Yeah.
Fair. That's fair.
No,
awesome.
I think it was a desire to, like I said, look under the hood of the car, get inside a story, try to fight my way through it, to understand how stories work. And it was the delight that I felt as a boy when I encountered certain movies or books. Like, there's just some, like, the butterflies in the stomach that I would feel when I was reading a really great, well-told story. Are just, it's just like, there's nothing like it. So I just wanted to contribute to the world in that way. I felt like I wanted to try my best to see if I could make something that would stir somebody's deep waters. But again, really believing that the Holy Spirit would use this in whatever way he would. But I had learned through songwriting that you have to hold that so loosely. You have to hold it with an open hand and trust him to do with it what he will. So, for example, just a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I got an email that just made me sob. Jamie and I were at home a few weeks ago, and I got an email through my somebody tracked down the email address on the website, and it was this beautiful story about a man's father who was resistant to the gospel for his whole life. And he was this old guy who just read the Wingfeather books because his grandkids had read them, and he wanted to have something to talk about them with, talk to them about. And so he got to a scene in book 4. It was Janner in the Fane of Fire, when Kalmar gets to go into the Fane of Fire and Janner doesn't. And I'm trying to be vague on purpose, so I don't want to split. And the guy in his email told me that his dad came out of the bedroom weeping and said that he wanted to follow Jesus after he read that section. Like, I could never have planned it.
Wow.
Right? I could wait. That scene was not something that I was even thinking about. Could this be something that would whatever? And it's still a little confusing to me that is the scene that did it. But it underscores the fact that, like, when a Christian makes art, we surrender it to the work of the Spirit. And the fact is, the Spirit uses art by non-Christians too, all the time, right? And so we just get to be like, he invites us to participate with him in that, and then we get to, like, sit there and eat our popcorn and watch what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always do feel like in the work you have a front row seat to what God is doing, and you get to see it unfold, and you see it maybe up close and personal as a singer, songwriter, and a writer now, and film producer, I guess, too. But there is something beautiful about giving that level of freedom in your just expression of beauty as you are being creative, because the identity and the story didn't come out to my kids, but it was like hitting me right in the face, but my kids have
enjoyed the story,
and they just wanted to keep going. Stop, Dad. I don't care that I have to go to bed. I want to keep reading. And because it was a good story. And I feel like that we need to capture that gift, that creative gift of just being able to tell a story really well, so that our kids want to follow the story, but along the way, it's not like you're catechizing or lecturing, but you're speaking to a worldview. Now, you're speaking in such a way that they can get the bigger picture, and I feel like that's what I love about the books, and our kids love the animated series as well. And even though they're older now, they love the animated series. So it's great. Now you have a new book coming out too, though.
Oh yeah, can you tell us about your new book?
Yes. Oh my goodness. The fun thing is, so season 2 of the animated series is releasing over the course of this year, and that has just been amazing.
Oh.
And has, it's more and more people are discovering the books through the TV show and vice versa. And so one of the fun things is that it's given us the opportunity to make some of these ancillary books, like books that kind of add to the mythology of the world. And so we already had Pembroke's Creaturepedia, and which is a list of all the creatures that Janner reads about in the story. But then I got to write a Ranger's Guide to Glipwood Forest last year, and that released earlier this year. Just a delightful excuse to go back into Glipwood and go back in time 400 years before the events of the Wingfeather Saga, and write about the scouring of Glipwood Forest. And my son, who's now, who is, 8 maybe when the first book came out, he's now 25 and he's a book illustrator. So he got to illustrate it, which was amazing. And so the next book that is releasing is called The Prince of Yorshadun, which is our first children's picture book that is a Wingfeather book, which I'm so excited about because it's based on a short story that I wrote that's in Wingfeather Tales. And my Jennifer Trafton, my sister-in-law, is a wonderful author. She adapted the story. And it's the picture in my mind is of a parent holding a little kid up in their lap and going through this beautifully illustrated picture book. Once again, about identity and about names and the importance of names.
Oh, that's so good.
So it is like you being the grandfather now.
It is.
Now you can see, in just a few years, your grandchildren will be reading this book.
So I dedicated this to my granddaughter. Yeah, she's the dedication in this book.
Praise
God. And
God.
it's a great book. It's so clever the way they adapted the story, and the artist, because it's full of little Easter eggs, like Where's Waldo-y stuff and secret codes that have to be deciphered. And so it's this really beautifully interactive book. So I can't wait for people to see it.
Oh, that's awesome. When is that coming out? Is it
August,
coming up soon?
Yes, August. It's in a few weeks. Yes. August 16th, I think.
All righty.
Oh, that's awesome.
Great. Awesome.
Well, we could probably continue because I like God of the Garden really resonated with me. There's some other, great stuff. And I'd love to, we could geek out on what's your songwriting process? And, there were people texting and saying, hey, is he writing any more music? Is it, do
you have any music in the works, or are you just focused on the book writing at this point?
Yeah, I'm still doing lots of concerts. We have this year the 25th anniversary of the Behold the Lamb of God show. We're in our 8th or 9th year of the Resurrection Letters tour. So we do the tour that celebrates the resurrection of Jesus, and we do another one that celebrates the incarnation. And that's just, I hope I'm doing that when I'm 90. And then in between, I do a fair bit of speaking and acoustic shows with my small band. And I love doing that. I have 10 or 11 albums. So it's 100 and something songs to choose from. So I don't mind playing old songs. And so right now in my life, I'll write a song here and there, but I'm not in the stage where I feel this urgency to write 1,000 songs every week. And I'm just really thankful to have songs that I still like to sing, and the stories still feel true, And so, I love it. I'm not saying that I'm not going to one day make a new record. I hope to, but who knows when.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. That's a great note to end on, I think.
All right. Well, Andrew, thank you for your time. We really enjoyed this conversation. And if you want to find out more, andrewpeterson.com, right, is the website. Is that correct?
Andrew-Peterson.com. Yeah.
Dash Peterson. Okay.
Yeah.
And
The
they
other
can
one
get the
goes to a
books and they
thriller
can see about the
author.
animated series.
The other one goes to a thriller author named Andrew Peterson. And so don't buy those. I've actually gotten emails from people that are like, yeah, I read your book. It had a lot of violence in it. And it's like, oh no. So yes, definitely Andrew-Peterson.com.
Andrew-Peterson.
Important distinction. Thank you.
Yes.
That's awesome. All right.
Alrighty.
God bless you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, guys.
So, didn't we tell you it was going to be amazing? All of these little ideas, phrases, concepts that Andrew brought up, I just was so blessed by.
Yes.
And I really do hope someday we can drive through Nashville and like go out and, get some whiskey or beer or bourbon or whatever with him. But anyway, let's just go to our, we have 5 key takeaways that we wrote down that we thought were key from this interview. First of all, that the importance of beauty. Parents, we need to shape the world to be beautiful for our children because beauty evangelizes even at a really young age. And art in all its expressions, visual art, music, all of those things, it's essential. Art is essential to life. Second, I loved this. Beauty resets our compass.
Mic drop.
Beauty resets our compass. Why? It reminds us of who we are and what we are made for. And it awakens in us that desire for the kingdom, right? God, to live God's kingdom here on earth, but also the kingdom of heaven.
And this one I really appreciated that which really resonated with me. Delight in your children. They need to know that they are wonderfully made and that they need that they learn that by how you respond to them, right? So it's
not just telling them, it's how do we respond to them?
And that delight is just, it showers our kids in a way that I don't think we fully can appreciate. And I love this. Sin is when I forget who I am. And our kids, if you think about it,
importance of identity.
I know it all comes back to that, right? Yeah. But our kids need to be solid in their identity as a child of God, and so do we, right? So we need to know that identity very clear, and that puts us at odds with sin.
And I think that comes out in the Wing Feather series too.
Yes, 100%. And again, I loved how he talked about, just the whole way he talked about the book is so good. And then finally, the key takeaway that we have for you is we need to learn to desire things in the right order. Sin happens when we live a life of disorder. As parents, we can help order the lives of our children in the right way. Right? That's our job, is try to help them reorder and order things properly. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please share it. Share it with a friend. Pass it on to somebody else.
Share the books, with friends. Let people know that there is good, beautiful art out there in so many forms.
And so his music is great. The Wing Feather series, whether it be the books or the animated series that's on Angel Studios, as well as his new children's book, that's all worth checking out. And again, if you want either of those 2 webinars we talked about at the beginning, visit us at messyfamilyproject.org. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.